a boy who looked at the stars. The summer fields of Wapakoneta stretched endlessly under a velvet sky, each blade of grass whispering secrets to the night. Lying flat against the cool earth, a young boy named Neil Armstrong fixed his gaze on the glittering expanse above. At just 6 years old, he wasn't dreaming of toy airplanes or racing cars. He was dreaming of flight itself, of soaring, of reaching the silent places beyond sight. Neil's world was a small one, shaped by the rhythms of a modest Midwestern town. His father, a state auditor, often traveled, and his mother, a quiet woman with gentle eyes, anchored the household. Their home was filled with books, maps, and a steady insistence that curiosity was a gift, not a distraction. Yet for all their support, it was the sky that called to Neil louder than anything else. At the age of 7, he took his first airplane ride in a Ford Trimitar, the Tin Goose, they called it. The memory would burn itself into his bones. The trembling metal, the deafening roar, the sudden drop in his stomach as the earth pulled away. For the first time, the distance between him and the stars felt smaller, almost reachable. He carried that moment inside him like a secret lantern, a flickering light that no hardship could extinguish. School was easy enough for Neil, though he spoke little and listened much. While other children raced to outshout one another, Neil built model airplanes, sketched cockpit controls in the margins of his notebooks, and charted imaginary courses to far-off moons. Teachers praised his mind, but often misunderstood his quietness for indifference. He didn't mind. Dreams, he knew, grew best in silence. Yet dreams do not come without shadows. As Neil grew, so did the world's troubles. The Great Depression squeezed his family's modest income, and talk of war murmured across oceans. Even in his safe corner of Ohio, Neil felt the tremors of a larger world creeping in, a world that might demand sacrifice before it offered the sky. One evening, as the sun surrendered to a deep indigo dusk, Neil climbed onto the roof of his family's house. Balanced carefully on the edge, he stretched his hand toward the first evening star. It shimmered cold and unreachable, but Neil smiled all the same. It wasn't about touching it today, it was about daring to believe it could be touched at all. That night, under a quilt of stars, he made a quiet promise. One day, he would find a way past the blue sky, through the endless black, to stand where only his dreams had wandered. Neil Armstrong, the boy no one noticed in the back of the classroom, had already set his course. And the stars, ancient and silent, seemed to nod in understanding. The silent strength of a dreamer. The hum of machinery filled the air, broken only by the sharp clatter of tools and the low murmur of engineers at work. Neil Armstrong, now a young man, moved through the hangar with quiet precision. Dressed in a grease-streaked flight suit, he carried an intensity that didn't demand attention but drew it nonetheless. There was no need for loud declarations. Neil's actions spoke for him. His journey to this point hadn't been easy. The boy who once climbed rooftops to touch the stars had grown into a man who understood the cost of that ambition. Studying aeronautical engineering at Purdue University was both a privilege and a test. Scholarships eased the financial strain on his family, but long nights spent wrestling with equations and flight simulations had taken their toll. Yet Neil never faltered. His quiet determination carried him forward, each challenge met with the same steady resolve. Keep moving, keep climbing. The Korean War marked a turning point in Neil's life. As a Navy pilot, he flew 78 combat missions, each one a crucible of skill, courage, and luck. The cockpit became both sanctuary and trial. Every takeoff could have been his last, every mission an impossible gamble with fate. On one fateful day, his aircraft was hit by enemy fire. Forced to eject at the last moment, Neil parachuted into hostile territory. Suspended in midair, with the wind tearing at his uniform and the earth rushing up to meet him, he felt a strange calm. This was the edge he'd always chased, the line between life and oblivion. Back home, his experiences left marks that couldn't be seen but were deeply felt. His reserved demeanor seemed more pronounced, his smiles rarer but sincere. The war had taught him not just the fragility of life, but its immense value. This knowledge became a silent companion, guiding his every decision. It was during these years that NASA, then known as NACA, began scouting test pilots for a bold new frontier, space exploration. Neil's reputation preceded him. Colleagues described him as unshakable, a man who didn't just pilot machines but seemed to understand their soul. When the call came, inviting him to join the burgeoning astronaut program, Neil didn't hesitate. His dream was no longer just his own, it was now part of something far greater. As Neil stepped onto the tarmac for his first assignment with NASA, he paused to glance at the sky. It was different now, segmented by equations and trajectories, stripped of the romantic haze of childhood. But the dream remained. The stars hadn't moved, they still waited, patient and unyielding. He tightened his grip on his helmet. If the journey ahead required sacrifice, he was prepared. For Neil, the promise made under that Ohio sky had never wavered. And so, with quiet resolve, Neil Armstrong took his first step toward the moon, unaware that history was waiting just around the corner. The longest walk ever dreamed. The world held its breath as the massive Saturn V rocket shuddered against its restraints. Inside the cramped command module, Neil Armstrong sat steady, his heartbeat measured, his mind razor-sharp. Around him, the instruments blinked and hummed like a living thing. Every fiber of his training, every ounce of his quiet endurance, led to this moment, Apollo 11's ascent into the unknown. The launch was a brutal symphony, raw power, fire, and fury. Yet inside Neil's helmet, there was only the sound of his own breathing and the quiet,